I never thought a Saturday morning at a cozy cafe could feel like the opening of a nightmare. Everything started so simply, just the ordinary ritual of me and Martin, my husband, grabbing breakfast like we always did. It was our tradition. He'd tease me about being half asleep until I had my first sip of coffee, and I'd roll my eyes but secretly love it. That morning felt no different, at least not until I met her. She was standing outside the cafe door while customers bustled in, her hoodie pulled low over her forehead. People passed her like she didn't exist, but her eyes, sharp, quick, too old for her young face, fixed on each person. When they landed on me, I slowed down. Something in that look made my chest tighten. "Do you have anything for food?" she asked. Not loud, not whining, just steady. I reached into my purse, $10. It was all the cash I had. For a second, I considered saving it since I'd need groceries later. But guilt bit at me. She was just a girl, probably not even 20, and I couldn't walk into that warm cafe with croissants and laughter buzzing around me while she stood hungry at the door. So I placed the bill in her hand. "Here." Her fingers closed around it, but instead of muttering a thank you and turning away, she leaned closer and pushed something into my palm. A folded, ragged scrap of paper. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't drink it." Before I could even react, she disappeared, slipped into the crowd with eerie speed. I unfolded the scrap, confused and uneasy. Scrawled across it in jagged handwriting were 7 words that made my heartbeat thunder in my ears. "Your husband put something in your coffee. Don't drink it." The cafe smell swirled through the air, rich coffee, butter pastries, yet suddenly it all felt wrong, like poison disguised as comfort, because right in front of me on the small round table was the cup Martin had just set down. Steam curled from the lid, innocent and inviting, like every other Saturday morning. For a moment, I just stared at it. My hands trembled, the note crinkling in my fingers. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe it was a sick prank. Maybe that girl was delusional. Maybe this was nothing. But deep inside, a cold pulse of dread began to spread. Martin returned from the counter with our croissants, humming under his breath. He smiled at me the way he always did. Easy, warm, the Martin everyone adored. "There's your coffee, sweetheart. Just how you like it." I couldn't move. He noticed my frozen expression. A shadow of concern flickered across his brow. "Clara? Something wrong?" My throat was dry. I slid the coffee away from me just a little, my fingertips brushing the lid. "What did you put in my coffee?" He blinked at me like I'd just asked the strangest thing. Then came a laugh, light, practiced. "What are you talking about? Sugar, like always." But there'd been a pause. Just half a heartbeat too long before the laugh. I saw it. I felt it. My chest clenched tighter. "Martin," I said slowly, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. "Don't joke. Tell me exactly what you put in it." His smile shifted, almost too quick, like he was resetting a mask he'd worn 1,000 times. Around us, plates clinked and spoons stirred, but it all blurred into background noise. Only the cup on the table seemed loud, screaming danger with every curl of steam. He tilted his head, watching me with strange amusement. "You're acting strange. It's just coffee." Something in the way he said it made my stomach lurch. My hands were slick with sweat as I clutched that note, the edges digging into my skin. Fear and disbelief fought inside me. This was my husband, the man who kissed me on the forehead every morning, who knew the exact way I liked my toast. And yet, for the first time, I wasn't sure I knew him at all. Martin leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "If you don't believe me," he said softly, "why don't you take a sip and find out?" My breath caught. His words slid under my skin like ice. I stared at the cup just inches away and realized that one small sip could change everything. I used to think of my marriage as the kind of story people envied. If you looked at us from the outside, you'd see what anyone would call a picture-perfect couple. Martin, the charming husband who always knew how to make people laugh, the man with kind eyes and polished shoes, the one who could talk to anyone. And me, Clara, the supportive wife, the safe space he always came home to. We had the neat little house with fresh flowers on the windowsill, the weekend routines, the silly inside jokes, everything tied up in a pretty bow. Or so it seemed. Sitting in the cafe with that folded note burning a hole in my hand, I found myself replaying the last few weeks. The memories twined together like they were trying to tell me something I hadn't dared admit before. The week before, Martin had swept me into one of his extravagant moods. Dinner at a restaurant I'd only seen in magazines, rose petals scattered on the table, a wine bottle that cost more than my paycheck. I'd laughed nervously, half flattered, half wondering why he was being so over the top when we'd just argued about his long hours. He raised his glass and said, "To us, Clara, always us." His face shone with devotion, and I forced the nagging thought away. Sometimes perfect can be a little too perfect. But then there were the smaller moments, like his smile in the mornings when he handed me my mug. "Your fuel," he'd say, kissing the top of my head. And I'd sip without a second thought. It was such a normal, endearing habit that it had practically become our ritual, stitched into the fabric of who we were. I never once paused to ask how he knew exactly when to bring it, or why he sometimes hovered until I finished half the cup. Why would I? What kind of wife suspects her husband for something like this? Even our disagreements had their shine. A few days ago, we'd fought over his phone buzzing late at night. He grabbed it quickly, muttered something about work stress, and rolled over. I remember lying awake, staring at the ceiling, telling myself I was paranoid. My Martin wouldn't hide things from me. And yet, that uneasy little knot had already started growing in my chest. Mrs. Green, my elderly neighbor, had once laughed as she handed me mail. "Your guy is a keeper," she said. "He mows the lawn before I can even ask such a gentleman." I'd smiled and agreed, brushing off the flicker in my mind that whispered, "Why is he so eager to look perfect for everybody else?" I convinced myself it was pride, or maybe just his way of being kind. Now, with that note in my hand, every memory rang differently. Rose petals no longer felt romantic. They felt like distractions. That perfect coffee each morning suddenly looked like routine with a darker edge, and those late-night calls, those quick explanations, they no longer sounded harmless. They sounded like rehearsed excuses. I thought of him humming as he brushed crumbs off the counter, telling me, "Don't worry about anything. I'll always take care of you." I clung to those words then, but in the cafe, they replayed in my head like an eerie promise. Still, a part of me fought back. This was Martin, the man I met at a friend's barbecue who made me laugh so hard I spilled soda down my dress. The man who drove 3 hours in the rain to surprise me on my birthday. Could he really be the same person a ragged homeless girl warned me about? Maybe the girl really was confused. Maybe she was unstable. Maybe it was all in my head. That's what I told myself, shoving the horrible thought down as I sat stiff in that cafe chair. But my body betrayed me, my hands clammy, my pulse thumping. And deep down, I knew those little doubts hadn't begun today. They'd been creeping in, disguised as nothing, waiting for something like this to finally drag them into the open. As Martin nudged the coffee closer again with that easy smile of his, my mind replayed all the red flags I had ignored. The too perfect gestures, the way he grew defensive the moment I questioned his whereabouts, the polished exterior that dazzled everyone, even me, until that note forced me to notice the cracks. And now, for the first time in 3 years, the thought twisted inside me like a knife. Maybe the man across from me wasn't my protector. Maybe he was the threat. I used to laugh whenever my mom told me, "You'll really know someone when you see how they fight." Back then, I brushed it off as one of those overused sayings people threw around. But sitting across from Martin these last few weeks, arguments sparking more often than I wanted to admit, I realized how true her words were. Our disagreements never started loud. Martin had a way of keeping his voice calm, as if he were above getting angry. That calmness made me feel like the crazy one, like I was overreacting. It usually began with something small. Me asking why his phone buzzed at midnight when he swore he was asleep, or why he never let me run errands with him but instead insisted on doing them alone. "Clara," he'd say with that exasperated sigh rubbing his forehead, "you have to stop being suspicious of everything I do. Don't you trust me?" That question always sank into me like a stone, because yes, of course I trusted him, or at least I used to. But once a seed of doubt is planted, it grows in the quiet, feeding on every tiny inconsistency. Take 2 nights ago. I was washing dishes when Martin walked into the kitchen, smiling, holding out a fresh cup of coffee. It wasn't unusual. He loved making me coffee even before bed, something I'd always considered sweet. But after that note in the cafe, I froze. My hand hovered over the mug, and I actually hesitated before taking it. Just for a split second, but long enough for him to notice. His smile faltered. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied too quickly. But he tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if he could read my mind. His voice softened, but there was an edge beneath it. "You think I'd... what? Do something to your coffee?" The words struck like a slap, because they were too close to the truth I was hiding. I tried laughing it off, saying, "Don't be ridiculous." Yet the tension hung there, suspended in the air. That night, we didn't curl into each other like we usually did. He rolled onto his side, sighing heavily, while I lay stiff as a board, staring at the ceiling. The silence felt louder than shouting. And the worst part? Somewhere deep inside, I wondered if he was replaying the same thought I was. She's starting to suspect me. The fights kept weaving themselves into our days, disguised as conversations. One afternoon, I asked if we could invite some friends over for dinner, my way of breaking the eerie bubble surrounding just the two of us. He brushed it off, saying he was too drained from work. I pushed. He snapped. "I don't need a crowd in my house right now, Clara. Why can't you just enjoy it being us?" His words echoed in the living room, sharp and cutting. He hardly ever raised his voice, but when he did, it sent a shiver through me. I wanted to scream back, to demand why he didn't want outsiders, why he guarded every corner of our life so fiercely. But my voice betrayed me. It crumbled into, I'm lonely, Martin." That silenced him. For a moment, his features softened, and he reached for my hand, almost like the man I married was still inside him, fighting to be seen. "You have me," he whispered. "Isn't that enough?" The words should have comforted me. Instead, they dug under my skin like a chain. And then there was Nina, that girl from the cafe. The one with the ragged hoodie and sharp eyes kept flashing in my mind. I hadn't seen her again, but it was like her note had branded my thoughts. Even when I tried to dismiss her as delusional, I couldn't, because her words mirrored the growing unease inside me. It was almost like she had put into writing the fear I hadn't dared voice out loud. I couldn't shake it. Her warning, Martin's too polite smiles, the sudden shift when I seemed to question him, it all tangled together until I couldn't separate what was paranoia and what was reality anymore. One evening, after yet another silent dinner where the clink of forks was the loudest sound in the room, Martin leaned across the table and studied me with that unreadable gaze. "You've changed lately," he said softly. "So have you," I answered before I could stop myself. His lips curved into a smile, but his eyes stayed cold. "Careful, Clara. Marriage doesn't work if we start imagining shadows where there aren't any." My fork slipped in my hand, clattering against the plate. I forced myself to nod, to mumble something about being stressed, but inside I was screaming. Because if there truly weren't shadows, why did it feel like I was already living in one? I couldn't shake her face. That girl from the cafe, Nina, though I didn't know her name yet, haunted me like a ghost that refused to rest. Those sharp eyes of hers seemed carved into my memory, her whispered warning looping in my mind at the strangest times. "Don't drink it." By the middle of the week, the note was still folded in my coat pocket, the paper fraying a little at the edges from how many times I'd taken it out, stared at it, stuffed it back again. I wanted to believe she'd been mistaken, maybe even unstable. But then I'd catch myself eyeing Martin's every gesture, the mugs he set down on the table, the way he laughed whenever I hesitated to sip. It wasn't normal suspicion anymore. It was a gnawing, unshakable need for answers. That's how I found myself one evening wandering the side streets near the grocery store, clutching my bag a little tighter, scanning for her. It was ridiculous, maybe even dangerous. I knew that. But something inside me kept pushing. Find her. Ask her why. At first, I didn't see her. There were shadows stretching along the brick walls, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above the store's dumpsters, the faint rustle of wrappers carried on the cold wind. I was about to give up when I spotted movement. Someone crouched behind a stack of cardboard boxes, arms wrapped around their knees. It was her. The same worn hoodie, the same restless eyes that darted the moment she noticed me. She straightened quickly, defensive, like a stray animal ready to run, but I stepped closer, forcing my voice steady. "Wait, please. I just want to talk." Her gaze narrowed. "You read the note?" The knot in my stomach tightened. "I read it. My words faltered. "Why did you give it to me? How could you possibly know what's in my coffee?" She tilted her head, studying me like I was the one under a microscope. Then she exhaled sharply, shoving her hands deeper into her hoodie pocket. "Because I've seen him. Your husband." The world felt like it tilted. My breath came shallow. "You've seen Martin." "Doing what?" Nina's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced toward the street as though afraid someone might appear. Finally, she muttered, "Let's just say I don't forget faces easily. He isn't the kind of man people think he is." Her words lit panic in me. All at once, I became painfully aware of the truth wrapped around my memories of Martin, the charm, the gestures, the way people adored him without question. This girl, she wasn't dazzled. She wasn't fooled. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. For the first time, her mask cracked. Her eyes flickered with something almost vulnerable. "Because you looked like me. Back then." "Back then?" I pressed, but she flinched and shook her head, retreating behind silence. I stepped closer, desperate. "Please, Nina. If that's your name..." She stiffened. "Don't say my name out loud." Her tone chilled me, but it only deepened the mystery. Who was she running from? And how did Martin connect to all of this? Before I could push again, she grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Whatever you do," she said low and urgent, Don't drink anything you didn't pour yourself. Not around him. Not ever. The raw edge in her voice made my skin crawl. I wanted to demand explanations, to shake her until the full truth came out. But at that exact moment, a car engine revved nearby and headlights swept across the alley. Nina jumped back, releasing me as if burned. In seconds, she was gone, swallowed by the dark, leaving me trembling in her absence. I walked home in a daze, my mind racing. Her warning wasn't a riddle anymore. It was a plea. She knew something real. When I walked through the front door of our house, Martin was there, greeting me with a smile and a warm mug in his hand. Long day? I made your favorite tea this time. The cup hovered inches from me, the steam rising sweet and innocent. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear. I remembered Nina's fingers gripping my wrist, her voice sharp with fear. Not around him. Not ever. I forced a smile, reached out, and pretended to adjust the mug on the table. But I didn't drink. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom, clutching the secret in my chest so tightly it felt like it might burst. For the first time, I admitted it to myself. This wasn't paranoia. Something was terribly, awfully wrong, and the person I needed to fear most was the man waiting in the living room with that perfect smile. I balanced the note in my hand under the cafe table, trying not to shake. The words stared up at me again, jagged and urgent. Your husband put something in your coffee. Don't drink it. I must have read it 10 times by now, each letter carving deeper into me like a wound that refused to close. The coffee sat between us. Steam curled upward, innocent and sweet-smelling, but to me it looked like poison vapor rising into the air. Martin leaned back in his chair, his usual picture of composure, broad shoulders relaxed, smile easy, eyes sparkling in that practiced way they always did when we were in public. He'd ordered our favorite croissants, placed the napkins neatly, even asked if I wanted extra sugar for the coffee. To anyone else in the cafe, we must have looked like the happiest married couple. But the more charming he looked to them, the more suffocated I felt. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs, nails digging into fabric, and asked again, voice low but clear, "What did you put in my coffee?" The smile didn't falter right away. He chuckled, a sound that should have been comforting, but now twisted sharp. "Clara? Really? Just sugar. Same as always. Why are you acting like this?" The pause. I saw it again, that flicker in his eyes, gone almost as soon as it appeared, but too quick, too aware. My gut clenched as if that tiny flicker was confirmation enough. I slid the cup back across the table, pushing it toward him. People at the tables nearby barely noticed, wrapped in their own conversations. But to me, the gesture thudded like a gavel hitting wood. "Then you drink it," I said. The smirk fell. For half a second, his face was blank, unreadable. Then he barked out another laugh, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable. You think I'd drug your coffee? Do you hear yourself?" My chest heaved with shallow breaths. His words tried to gaslight me back into safety, but I clung to that note like it was made of iron. I imagined Nina's eyes on me, urging me, "Stay sharp." "Exactly," I said softly, though my hands shook under the table. "If it's just sugar, drink it." Martin's jaw flexed. He lifted the cup, fingers curling around it slowly, deliberately, while his eyes stayed locked on mine. For a moment, I thought he was about to call my bluff. But then he stopped. "You don't trust me," he said finally, setting the cup back down with a heavy clink. His voice had changed. Not angry, not teasing, but low, tight. The shift was worse than shouting. "After everything I do for you, Clara, after all I give you, one little stranger, you don't even know her name, And suddenly you see me as the villain? His hand tapped against the table, a soft and steady rhythm, like he was holding something back. You're avoiding the question, I murmured, grasping the note harder under the table until it nearly tore between my clenched fingers. The cafe around us blurred again, blenders whirring, cups clattering, laughter spilling from a group of college kids. But inside our little corner, silence roared. Martin finally leaned forward, his eyes catching mine with unnerving intensity. Here's the thing, Clara. Trust isn't about constantly testing the other person. Sometimes you have to choose. Do you trust me, or do you trust some girl who probably wanted money for pills? He said it like a dagger, like every word was meant to slice through my resolve. My lungs tightened. Maybe he was right. Maybe Nina was unstable. But if that was true, then why couldn't he just drink the coffee? I pushed the cup further toward him. Drink it, I insisted, louder now, drawing a glance from the neighboring table. His smile vanished completely this time. He sat back slowly, exhaling through his nose, and for a brief second, I saw something behind his mask. Anger. Raw, dark, and uncontrolled. He smoothed it quickly, plastering the charm back on, but it was too late. I'd caught it. Martin picked up the cup, swirled it casually, then set it down untouched. You've lost your mind, he whispered through clenched teeth, but his grip on the handle lingered just a second too long before sliding away. My instincts screamed. I sat there, heart pounding, watching my own husband and wondering who he really was. This wasn't just paranoia now. This wasn't chance. Something was being hidden from me. And in that moment, as my untouched coffee sat cold between us, I knew. Whatever this was, whatever truth Nina carried with her, I needed to uncover it. Because Martin wasn't trying to prove my fears wrong. He was trying to get me to doubt myself until I stopped asking questions. And I wasn't about to stop. The silence between us after that cafe confrontation lingered like a storm cloud that refused to move. Martin carried on as if nothing had happened, bringing me tea in the evenings, smiling when neighbors waved, making his usual sarcastic jokes during dinner. But every gesture sat wrong in my chest now. It all rang hollow. I couldn't shake the image of his face, the flash of anger I'd seen when I pushed that coffee toward him. The tightness in his voice when he accused me of losing my mind. That was when I realized if I ever wanted the truth, I couldn't wait for him to hand it over. I had to find it myself. It started small. I began watching him, really watching him, at home. Every time he touched a kettle or a mug, I felt my stomach tense. I noticed how often he hovered near my cup until I drank from it. How he'd tilt his head, eyes flicking quickly to me like he was checking something. And when I pretended to sip, setting it down half-finished, he'd subtly frown, irritation flashing in his jaw before disappearing behind a smile. The first night I set my untouched cup by the sink, I came back later to find it gone. Not rinsed, not waiting in the dishwasher. Gone. That was the moment my heart finally broke. My perfect, careful husband was hiding things from me. Not just excuses, not just late-night phone calls. Something deeper. One morning, when he left his briefcase open on the counter, curiosity and dread tangled in me until I gave in. My hands shook as I shuffled through papers and receipts. Most were harmless, but one stopped me cold. A pharmacy slip. Not from any place I knew. And not for common medication. The list of substances printed along the bottom made my throat clench. They weren't prescriptions for him. They weren't things an ordinary doctor would casually order. I didn't even recognize half the names. But one I did. Zolpidem. A powerful sedative. I stuffed the slip back quickly, rising to my feet just as I heard the front door unlock. By the time Martin stepped inside, I was back at the sink with shaking hands, pretending to wash dishes. My chest thudded so hard I thought he might hear it. That afternoon, when he claimed he needed to work late, I seized the chance. I went for his laptop. He was oddly protective of it, always logged out, always wiped clean as though he suspected my curiosity. But that evening, luck bent in my direction. He'd forgotten to close the browser, and what I saw wasn't work spreadsheets or funny emails. It was strings of messages, transactions, conversations with someone he referred to only as D. My eyes skimmed too fast to catch everything, but enough sank in. Discussions about chemical effects, dosage levels, phrases like, "She won't fight back if you keep it consistent." Clarity hit me like cold steel. My husband wasn't just charming and protective. He was deliberate, calculating. He had been planning something around me, shaping my life sip by sip. I closed the laptop gently, though inside I wanted to scream. My legs carried me to the couch, but my mind was racing too quickly, colliding with itself. And then, almost as though she'd been waiting for me, I saw her again. Nina. Outside, across the street, leaning against a lamppost, her face hidden by her hood, but those eyes locked on me through the glass. I froze. Did she follow me? Had she been watching me this whole time? The sensible part of me should have felt fear, but instead, oddly, my heart slowed. There was an unspoken understanding in her gaze. She knew. She hadn't disappeared like a figment of my imagination. She was still here, in some twisted way, protecting me. I slipped out the door and crossed quickly. "You were right," I whispered, clutching her arm. My fingers trembled. "I saw it. He's been hiding things, medications, messages. I don't even recognize half of it, but it's real, isn't it? He's doing this to me." Nina searched my face for a long moment, like she was deciding whether I could handle the truth. Then she nodded once, slowly. "I told you," she said simply. "He's not what you think." Her voice cracked slightly, softer now. "I know because I've seen men like him before." I wanted to push, to demand she explain everything at once, but her expression silenced me. Her eyes darted around, cautious, scanning shadows as if danger could spring at any moment. "I'll tell you more," she said under her breath. "But not here, not now. Be careful. Whatever you found, it's just the start." And then, true to her ghost-like pattern, she slipped away again, gone around the corner before I could beg her not to leave. That night, I lay in bed beside Martin, who slept peacefully, breathing evenly. His hand rested close to mine, as though nothing was wrong. But I stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, pulse hammering with the knowledge building inside me. He wasn't just hiding little lies. He was orchestrating something bigger, feeding me a story I had swallowed without question for 3 years. And soon I promised myself I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I don't think there's ever a single moment when a marriage collapses. It's not one fight or one unanswered question. It's every little piece cracking until finally you hear the whole thing shatter. For me, the shattering came the night I decided I couldn't pretend anymore. Not after the pharmacy slip, not after the laptop messages, and certainly not after Nina's eyes had locked with mine like she knew exactly what I was living through. Martin thought everything was still under his control. He hummed as he made dinner, poured me my glass of wine, and set my tea gently in front of me the way he always did. But this time, instead of sipping it while forcing my smile, I looked at him across the table and said, "We need to talk." Something in my voice must have been different, because he froze with his fork in midair. Slowly he set it down. "About what?" His tone was calm, but his eyes sharpened. I placed the folded pharmacy slip onto the table between us. "Do you want to explain this?" The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed down on my chest. His gaze dropped for a fraction of a second before flicking back to me. "Where did you find that?" His voice wasn't surprised. It was cold, controlled. Why do you have sedatives, Martin? Why are there receipts for things you shouldn't even be buying without a prescription? And you don't need to deny it. I saw your messages. I know something's going on. For a moment, the mask slipped entirely. His smile vanished. His jaw tightened, and his eyes, those perfect shining eyes that once made me feel so safe, turned flat, empty. You went through my things, he said. Not anger exactly. Almost amusement. My hands shook, my fingernails biting into my palms. Why, Martin, why would you do this to me? And then he laughed. Not the charming, warm laugh I'd heard at parties, the one that made everyone love him. This was darker, bitter. Because, Clara, you're easier this way. Do you understand? You're manageable. Each word landed like a hammer blow. I don't want a wife who questions, who argues, who pulls away. I want peace, control. You should be grateful. You smiled more when you weren't thinking so hard all the time. Tears pricked my eyes, but I bit them back. You've been drugging me? I was guiding you, he corrected quickly, sharpness creeping into each syllable. Life is messy when people don't know their place. I was making things easier for both of us. I couldn't breathe. Every moment of care flashed in my mind. The morning coffees, the warm teas, the nights when fatigue wrapped me too heavy, when I thought something was wrong with me. My body wasn't betraying me. He was. You're sick, I whispered. My voice cracked, but it carried enough steel to make him stiffen. And tomorrow, everyone else will know it too. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I forced myself to hold his stare, though my hands trembled. I already sent everything, the receipts, the laptop screenshots, to someone who will use them if anything happens to me. You can't hide this anymore. For the first time, control slipped from his face. His expression wavered, something shifting beneath the calm surface. Anger. Panic. Then, too quickly, he leaned back in his chair, smirking again. You think anyone will believe you? Look at me, Clara. Look at you. Who do you think people are going to trust? But before I could answer, a hard knock rattled our front door. Martin's head snapped toward the sound, disbelief flashing in his features. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice. This is Detective Hale. Open the door. My heart surged into my throat as I rose from the chair. Martin shot up faster, reaching to grab my wrist, but I yanked free just as the knock turned into the crash of the door bursting open. 2 officers swept in, followed by Detective Hale with calm authority etched on his face. Martin spun toward me, fury erupting in his voice. You did this! But I didn't flinch this time. I stood straighter than I had in months, even as tears streaked down my cheeks. No, Martin. You did this. I just stopped drinking your coffee. The detective moved forward, reciting words I barely heard over the ringing in my ears, the rustle of handcuffs, Martin's curses echoing down the hallway as they dragged him away. And then there was quiet. I collapsed into the chair, shivering, my body not yet believing it was truly over. But when I looked toward the street through the front window, I saw her, Nina, standing in the shadows, hood up, watching. Her expression wasn't triumphant, just steady, almost protective. Our eyes met and I mouthed, "Thank you." She gave a small nod before disappearing once more into the night. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, not the suffocating one